Thank you, Mary, and thank you all. This is a room full of friends, and it's nice to see so many familiar faces. I won't go on at great length. I hope that we can have a fairly open question and answer session after Courtney's had a chance to share her thoughts as well. I just wanted to update you on two particular election law bills. The first, Mary, I think, summarized as well as I possibly can, and there's not that much to it, but we are allowing 17-year-olds to vote in primaries if they will be 18 and eligible to vote in the general election. It just makes sense. If you're going to participate in the general election, you should have the chance to participate in selecting the candidates who will run in that general election. That was a bill sponsored by one of my colleagues, Senator Link from Lake County. I sponsored what we call the omnibus election law bill. Every 1 or 2 years we come back and we revisit a whole host of election law related issues. And this was a particularly good collection in my view. And it follows on the trend for the last 10 years of liberalizing voting laws to make it easier to vote. And as well, generally easier to get on the ballot if you're seeking to run for office. So with this bill that I passed this spring, we did, for the first time, take a big step towards reality. With you can shop online, you can pay your bills online, but you couldn't register to vote or request an absentee ballot. With this law, once it's fully implemented, we'll all be able to jump online. The experience in California was dramatic. I think in the first several months, 800,000 people either registered to vote or changed their voter registration online. It was really a remarkable reaction. My kids wouldn't know how to fill out a paper form. You know, they got to get online to do it, or if it's not real. And this is just a generational change, and we're trying to keep up with the flow. We've also done a lot on voting access. We've refined the early voting rules, in particular with respect to Sunday hours. We've clearly prohibited the electioneering at the early voting polling places that would be prohibited on election day. And we've mandated the creation of college centers where you can vote early if you're a student away at college. We've done a lot on provisional voting. Voters come to the wrong precinct, or they are sure they're registered, but they're not turning up in the book. We've given voters much more ample opportunity to prove that they are registered to vote after the election and have their votes counted. We also continue to push grace period registration. After voter registration closes a month before the election, until several years ago, you were out of luck. Now we've created this grace period voting option where you can come in and register in person at one of the offices and vote. And so we're clarifying that you can participate in the process that way. We also dealt with some ballot access issues. If you read the stories in the Chicago Tribune about the local election boards, if you're running for a local office, you file your nominating petitions and then you have to defend them in front of the people you're running against. That really is an odd, anachronistic throwback to a different day. We were able to take that responsibility away from school boards in this election. So those contested races for school boards, we don't see this sort of that brand of brass knuckle politics here in Gentile Oak Park, but in some other parts of Illinois, races for school districts are really pretty cutthroat. And the electoral boards would be the school boards themselves. So we've outsourced that to the county. In one element that got some negative press, I was a little surprised by, we increased the requirement for Chicago aldermen to get on the ballot. For the last 40 or 50 years, they've had to collect 2% of the signatures of the voters in the last election to run for alderman. Now, if you want to run for village trustee in Oak Park, you've got to collect 5%. So in most city wards, it was a couple hundred signatures. And this is when I say mostly we are trying to improve ballot access. We want it to be easy to run for office, but not too easy. And let me explain what I mean. If anybody could run for office and you don't have to demonstrate even the most basic political organizing skills, you're going to have a ballot cluttered with everybody who thinks they should be the alderman or the village trustee. You want candidates to demonstrate the basic political skills required to campaign and to win, and I think that's a pretty good proxy for the basic skills to serve an elective office. So we doubled the requirement, as Cranes pointed out and beat me over the head with it. Now they have to collect about 400 signatures. It's still less than you'd have to collect to run for village trustee in Oak Park, but it was scandalous that we were trying to keep all these good people from running for alderman. We also dealt with some campaign finance leftovers. When we passed, I was the chief sponsor of the first bill to limit campaign contributions in Illinois. And when we did that, we recognized that the playing field is not level. A millionaire could walk in and say, you know what, I'm going to spend all my money to buy an office. Thank heavens that's rarely worked out well for the millionaires here in Illinois, but you could talk to Senator Oberweis, my colleague, as he worked his way down from president to state senator, the lowly office. But a self-funder can walk in and really change the dynamic in a race. And we said from the beginning, if someone's going to do that, the limits have to come off for all the other candidates. You've got to have a fair playing field. We had to extend that to cases where independent expenditure committees, the Citizens United kind of political committee that was upheld by the federal courts, comes in and throws $2 million into a race. That distorts the electoral process, and you need to give candidates the right to raise the money to combat that. We also found from the last election cycle that they were getting pretty clever, the independent expenditure committees. They knew they couldn't break the threshold, so they started creating multiple independent expenditure committees. So you'd have 5 make-believe independent committees lined up against a candidate. None of them individually would break the threshold to trigger the relief for the candidates. So we're going to aggregate that. If 5 or 6 candidates or committees altogether spend in excess of the limits, the candidate can fight back. So that's, again, a broad overview of the key provisions in the election law bill this year. I'm looking forward to a conversation, having shared with you just the highlights. And am I turning it over to you now? Is that, or Mary, are you doing? Okay. I'm turning it back over to the boss.
Okay. Thank you. As you know, Cook County Clerk David Orr is responsible. Well, he's been the Cook County Clerk since 1991. And he is the chief election authority for Cook County. And Cook County is the 3rd largest election jurisdiction in the country. So here to speak about some of the practicalities of implementing some of this legislation is Courtney Greve.
Thank you for having me. Clerk Orr apologizes for not being able to be here. He had another commitment, but hopefully I can answer your questions and fill you in a little bit about how we're going to implement the laws that Senator Harmon was so great to help us push forward. We had a wonderful working session where we brainstormed a lot of ideas on how we could make elections better and more accessible, and we're thrilled that we were able to get so many changes through. I'm going to talk largely about 17-year-olds voting and online voter registration, but first I want to touch on a couple other things. As you know, Clerk Orr has been in office for a long time. He is considered one of the experts nationally on elections, and so just 2 weeks ago he addressed the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. You know how President Obama said we have to do something about these lines. Well, the commission was established to do just that. And David Orr went to Cincinnati to address the commission and gave them a lot of ideas and real useful tips on what we do in Cook County, such as how we track all of the calls that we get on election day. This may seem like a little thing, but to election administrators, it makes a big deal. We are able to pinpoint precincts that have significant problems, or where they need more help, or they are running out of ballots, or they need another touch screen, whatever the case may be. And the system that we use, we're hoping that other jurisdictions might want to tap into that resource. So one thing that Clerk Orr has really tried to do, especially since technology has really become so much a part of elections, is share those resources with other jurisdictions, with other counties around the state, and with other election authorities around the country. So hopefully we're going to see a report from that commission soon, and we're looking forward to what they're going to present as best practices for the country. One thing that Senator Harmon talked about is grace period voting and extending that right up almost until election day. It would essentially go through the end of early voting, which ends the Sunday before election day. One thing that we're trying to do in suburban Cook County is hopefully bring grace period to all of the early voting sites. I know that I worked at the Village Hall, at our Village Hall, because I live in Oak Park. I worked at Village Hall during early voting for the presidential election, and a lot of people came in thinking that they could register through grace period and then vote at the Village Hall. Well, in fact, we only had systems in place to do that at our satellite offices and downtown, so at the circuit court offices and downtown. And we're trying to bring that service to all of the early voting sites. So if someone thinks that they're registered or thought that they had updated their registration, but they didn't, then we could actually do it during early voting. It's as close as we're going to get to same-day voter registration, because we don't have that yet on Election Day. That, you know, maybe that's the next big push. Let's see. Electoral boards, we are very excited to start handling the school district challenges to candidacies. The Cook County Electoral Boards is overseen by the clerk's office, and it's a 3-member panel. We currently already did park boards, library boards, fire districts, and some other smaller jurisdictions. We're still hoping to bring all of the different jurisdictions, municipalities, and I'm forgetting one, townships, thank you, municipalities and townships under our umbrella, largely because it's very difficult for the general public to know where to go to find out about those challenges and then follow the cases. Do you know if it's being handled fairly or not? Because it's handled differently in every jurisdiction. Some publicly announce when the meetings are going to be, some don't. Some post the decisions online, some don't. If they were all handled by our expert panel who've been doing it for a very long time, the decisions would be consistent, all the information would be public, everything would be online. And so we're really excited to take on school districts and show that we can handle the extra caseload, and hopefully then we can add on the different types, municipalities and townships. As far as online mail ballot requests, so a couple of years ago we changed it from absentee to mail ballots. You don't have to be absent. It's no excuse mail voting. So we try to take that absentee term out of it as much as we can because it's a misnomer. People don't have to be out of town. They don't have to have an excuse. Anybody can vote by mail. The problem with it before was that there were all these steps. You had to download or print, go to your local village office and get the application, then mail it to our office. Then we would verify it and we would mail you your ballot. And then you would fill out your ballot and vote, and then you would mail it back to us. So it's going back in the mail quite a few times. If you didn't have access to print it or download it, you could also call us and add one more step, so then it would go back and forth in the mail 4 times. So with technology being what it was, we really wanted to be able to put the online requests, make those available to everyone, so that at least you're cutting out the beginning steps. We're still going to mail you the ballot, and you're going to still mail it back to us, but it cuts out those first 2 steps. The good news about this is that we're working on it now. It's a May bill, meaning every county doesn't have to do it. We are very committed to doing it, hope to have it ready for the primary. We're working on it as we speak. And if we're considering it kind of our beta version, if all goes well, then we're going to share it with all the other counties in the state so that every county can do it and have the simple system to make it work and put it on their website. Security measures in place. Most people may know that when people talk about voter fraud, it very often is actually about absentee ballot fraud. People who request an absentee ballot who are not really the voter. So we need to make sure that this system is especially secure. We are putting in measures that are not quite finalized, but that we hope will weed out any of those problems, such as you would have to provide a unique email address We would then send you an email, and you would have to click on a link in the email to verify that you are you and you are not some robot or some campaign requesting hundreds of ballots. That's something that we're working on. It's actually a little bit stronger than the online voter registration system because with online voter registration, we are going to be linking up to the Secretary of State's database of driver's licenses and state IDs. So in that case, you will only be able to use online voter registration if you have one or the other, a driver's license or a state ID in Illinois. Because the system has to recognize your information. That is how we are getting your signature. Your signature on your license is then sent to us from the Secretary of State's office, and that's the signature that we will verify during early voting or on your mail ballot request or on Election Day, because we've captured it from the Secretary of State database. With that system, the state is actually preparing the system and getting it ready. We are at the table and we are working with them to hopefully make it as user-friendly, mobile-friendly, and open as possible, meaning we want, if the League of Women Voters wants to somehow tweak it and make it their own, we're hoping that there's going to be an open source API. If you have a techie on your crew in Illinois, you know, maybe you could create your own mobile app of the online voter registration system. We are working with Rock the Vote to try and do the same thing. So I think it's going to be really exciting, and like the senator said, huge impact in the 17 other states that already have it, although not all of them are on board or are live yet. But in the ones that are live, they've had a huge response. So we're really excited about online voter registration. Last but not least, 17-year-olds voting. This is really important. The law doesn't go into effect until January. It gives us a very short window for the primary. So it's about 6 weeks before the voter registration deadline. If you go out and try to register students at OPRF in December, those registrations will not be valid, those 17-year-olds. You can't register them until after January 1st. Okay, so that's an important thing that we need to remember. And then what we are hoping to do at the clerk's office is coordinate a county-wide effort with the League of Women Voters, with other interested groups, with Chicago Votes, with MICVA, with anybody who wants to participate, and have a couple of days or a week where we make sure we go to every high school, and we register the 17-year-olds who will be 18 by the presidential election, or sorry, the gubernatorial election in November. So we are hoping to do that the last week of January or the first week of February. Dates have not been set, but the leagues, every local chapter and regional, state, will all get a letter from us letting you know how you can participate. I am sure we will have our local schools covered because you're so active out here. It's great. And with that, I'll stop, and if you have questions, we can take them. Okay?
Yes, so any chance that you would have the online voter registration system ready for the 17-year-olds?
No. They are working on it. The State Board of Elections is working on it, but I don't think that that's going to happen.
Next election.
It'll be ready hopefully by next summer in time for the general. Mm-hmm.
So that's when we'll start next summer.
So online voter registration, by law, they're supposed to have it ready by July 1st.
Okay, so I'm a new voter in Illinois. I want to register to vote. That's next summer. I can register online, fill out the information online, and then what happens?
So, okay, so there's a back-end process that happens. Once you fill it out, then the Secretary of State's office has a certain window of time, I think it's 48 hours, where they have to verify your information. Once it's verified, then they have to send it to the local election authority. So in suburban Cook County, it would be our office, the clerk's office.
By mail or?
It's all digital. It's all digital. And then Once we get the information, then we have to notify the voter. And we have, I believe, 5 days to do that. As it gets closer to Election Day, we have a shorter window, but we'll make sure to notify voters as soon as possible. I think that by email, by email. And then you'll also get your letter in the mail with your voter registration, your voter ID card.
Okay, and then, but you don't actually vote online, you still have to
No.
go down to.
You can vote by mail
Yeah, I got it.
early or on Election Day, but not online. Not yet. Yes.
17-year-olds will have to show state ID or state driver's license in order to register, I assume.
In order to register online when that's ready. But they do not have to show it to register to vote. There are all the regular forms of forms of ID that are acceptable are still acceptable. Their student ID works, a piece of mail that they've gotten at their house, birth certificate. There are a lot of forms that students can use. If students don't register and by next summer they want to participate in the general election and they register online, then they would need a driver's license or state ID. Because it's all about that signature match. We're not getting your wet signature online like we always have on the paper forms. So we need to get that from the Secretary of State. Yes.
Define this grace period that you mentioned, that's a new term.
So the regular registration period always has a deadline, and it's 21 days, I believe, before the election, maybe 28 days. It's about a month before. And the very next day, the grace period starts. And grace period means you can only register in certain places, but you still have the opportunity. You've missed the regular deadline, so we're going to make it's not as convenient to register, but there are still opportunities, so you don't have to miss out. Right now, those places are our offices, the county clerk's offices for suburban Cook County voters. So we have offices downtown, Maywood, Skokie, Rolling Meadows, all the courthouses.
The regular voter registration.
Do you want this?
The regular voter registration is either by mail or in person with a registrar. You can still do that, I believe, although it is so much less convenient. There's a processing time, and that's why we've always shut that off about a month before the election. The deputy registrars have to turn in their forms originally, and that took some time, and then the clerks would have to process them and type them all in. So that's why the regular registration period closes. The grace period, it's a little more difficult only because you have to, as a voter, have to cut out some of that processing time. You have to go in person to one of the offices, appear, to fill out the forms. You might be typing them in on a kiosk. So you can streamline that and allow the clerks to get caught up with the processing.
And then one other thing about grace period is that you actually vote at the same time. So you register and then you immediately vote. And that's the other reason why it has to be at one of our offices, because in order to have all of the ballot styles, sometimes we have 800, 900 ballot styles in suburban Cook County. In order to do that, you have to vote on a touch screen, because we can program the touch screens to have all those different ballot styles. We couldn't have all 900 paper ballots handy.
Question about online voting, which I understand several states have at this point. What's your best estimate of when we might be able to see that in our lifetime?
Yeah, in your lifetime. It takes a bit of fermentation. There's a real resistance to all of these efforts we've undertaken to liberalize voting. And there's the League of Women Voters is a wonderful nonpartisan organization. There's clearly a partisan slant to all this. Every year, as chairman of the executive committee, the subcommittee on election laws, we assign 3 or 4 or 5 bills sponsored by my colleagues demanding we have in-person photo ID before letting people vote. It's vote suppression. As a partisan matter, some of us are quite comfortable letting more people vote, because we believe the more people who vote, the better the results of the election. There's a subset of my colleagues who think exactly the opposite. The fewer people voting, the better. And that's I understand the partisan dynamic, but, so online voter registration was much more difficult to get through than I think we made it look, because we did a pretty comprehensive job here, but a lot of my colleagues were resistant. This notion of vote fraud, in-person vote fraud, is almost non-existent anywhere in the country. The stories from the city of Chicago circa 1942 just aren't true today. So there is still some potential for mischief with the absentee ballot processes, but I think even that is far better than it was 10 years ago. There's far more controls and far more certainty. But they raise the specter of vote fraud and, you know, the robots voting online over and over again. It's not going to happen. We need a little more fermentation time. Long answer to a simple question. In the way back there.
I would think that this business of doing being able to get the ballots online would actually eliminate some of the problems that Chicago had years ago. And it wasn't that many years ago when the precinct captain got the ballot for the person, went to the person's house, sat there with the person while they marked the ballot, and then they took the ballot, and you know what happened from there. If they didn't like what the person did, the ballot went into the various mysterious Chicago mail system and never made an appearance again.
It's been a long time since anything like that has been implicitly authorized by the system. How about that? No way.
I just picked up this literature from the back. It says number 2, bring ID. And that has not changed for us, right? We still are not requiring ID.
We don't require ID. I would encourage people to bring it just in case there's a snafu with what's in the... Yeah, most people do. But you know, this gets back to my last question. There is an assumption by some that everybody in the state has a photo ID. There are tons of people in Illinois who don't have photo IDs, but they have a right to vote. So I would encourage people to bring some ID to the polling place if they have it, just in case there's a snafu with the binders. You need to make sure you're in the right precinct, following some precinct realignment. If you've got that, you can usually find out where you're supposed to vote.
Add one thing to that. So one thing that we're also doing that will really relate to that is electronic poll books. I don't know how many of you are election judges, but you know the giant binder that the senator referred to that has all the registered voters in your precinct. Well, we piloted a program for the April election where we did electronic poll books in a small number of precincts. We're going up to 400 precincts for the primary election, and then hopefully by the general we will do all of the precincts. And so with that, it'll be very similar to how you check in at early voting. You know, at early voting, we pull up your registration on the screen, and we see your signature on the screen. It'll be very similar to that. We think it'll help with the lines, like President Obama was hoping we could all improve. We think it'll help with the lines, but also help us identify people more quickly. You know, sometimes election judges, you know, rightly are overwhelmed because there could be a lot of people in the precinct, and the person might be there, but they're just not looking in quite the right place, or, you know, a name like McFadden, there's an extra space, or it's spelled M-A-C instead of M-C, whatever the case may be. This will help that, because it'll allow them to do kind of keyword searching, so they can start with just a couple of letters and find that person more easily. So we think it'll be really great. As far as IDs go, Clerk Orr has been pretty vocal about not wanting to have voter ID laws in Illinois. He actually mentioned that in his testimony to the Presidential Commission because it came up a lot. He often cites the Texas example, where they did a study that about 300,000 people in Texas didn't have an ID, but also didn't have a way to get to a facility that could issue an ID. So especially in places, rural places, it's a big problem. One final thing about technology. If you didn't know, we made our voter information tool mobile last year. So anybody who goes to cookcountyclerk.com from their phone or their tablet is going to be taken directly to a user-friendly mobile version of our voter information tool. It's great on election day or in early voting when you just want to make sure you're in the right precinct or the right place. It's very quick. It has a Google map, tells you how to get there, and it also shows you your sample ballot. So it's something that if you could spread the word about, we really think it's great. And it doesn't require you to download anything. So, yeah.
Two things. One, I have to compliment David Orr on the website because information there, a ton about local elections and results, et cetera, et cetera. Well, number two, at the Cook County level, we're very concerned about people voting at all, but especially voting in the primaries. Because when you get to the general election, people say, well, I don't want to vote because my choice is A or B and I really want a D. Do you have any ideas of how to get people to really take voting in the primary seriously and get them out to vote?
I've been trying for years.
We have too, and it's just the level of participation in primaries is pathetic.
I think a big thing that would help improve participation is getting young people involved sooner and not just in hyped up presidential elections. I think that it really requires some groundwork starting in high school, maybe even grade school. We're trying to push out more civic lessons with the help of MCFA and with the help of the League and with the help of Rock the Vote, which has great lesson plans already available. But it really is about getting your foot in the door at the high schools and hoping that they will actually give the lesson. So personally, I think getting young people involved is a great way. I was talking to Mina before about getting more students, high school students involved from Oak Park. We don't have that many who participate as election judges. We don't have that many deputy registrars who are high school students. We would love to get more involved in this area. I know I would, I live here. So I'd love to see a more active student body. And hopefully, you know, I think a lot of 17-year-olds are going to participate. 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds are going to participate in this primary because they can, and it's something new. But it's not the best answer, but.
I'm new, so how did kids get involved? Or how would they begin to get involved?
So we have, the clerk's office runs a student judge program where they are equivalent to the adults in the precinct. They make the same amount of money. They have to get permission from a parent and a principal to be out of school that day. They work from 5 a.m. until after the polls close on election day. It's a big job, but they seem to really like it. We typically reach out through the teachers, the principals, the superintendents, and get the word out that way. But teachers who work at the schools are a great resource. Parents, I know I've had parents call me and say, we don't have a program at our school, but I want my student to participate, or my child to participate, and that's great. So all the information is on the website. I think there's a link on the homepage that says student involvement.
Okay, well, thank you very much.